Amazing. We will jump in. Thank you for joining. Hello and welcome to our session today. We will be discussing making engineer to order or ETO products simple to configure. My name is Emma Gaquin. I'm the Director of Demand Generation at Logic.io. I'm joined by Greg Fiorendo, Vice President of Sales for Manufacturing, Auto, and Energy at Salesforce, as well as Brian McRae, the Vice President of Salesforce Practice at Forefront, and Christian Taylor, a Solution Architect also with Forefront. Just to set the stage for us today, Greg will be sharing challenges faced by the manufacturing and ETO industries in regards to transformation. We'll then dive deeper into how Salesforce and Logic.io support ETO businesses to overcome those challenges. And then Brian and Christian will provide a few success metrics and stories, as well as a live demo. A housekeeping note before we get started: this is being recorded and is going to be shared to your inboxes within 24 hours of this live event. Feel free to interact with us throughout the session via our Q&A box. We will leave time for a few questions at the end of the session. If your question is a bit more nuanced, we'll be sure to follow up with you after the event to provide some clarity. I'm going to now hand it off to Greg to kick us off.
Awesome. Thanks, Emma. And thanks to everybody who's joined the webinar today. We're excited to have you. And I see that we've got quite a few existing customers, some customers that are evaluating. So hopefully we hit the mark in terms of addressing what you showed up for. If you've ever been on a Salesforce webinar or you've seen a participant from Salesforce join a partner webinar, you know that we like to share our big point of views for the industry, because we talk to hundreds and hundreds of manufacturers day in and day out. And before we look at the future of what quoting ETO products or highly configured engineered or products, the future, we want to take you back a little history of kind of the big transformational trends within the manufacturing industry that have arrived us here today in terms of Salesforce and Logic helping manufacturers transact more seamlessly with your customers. You know, the first big one was just product quality, that you could not maintain any sort of competitive advantage if you didn't make major investments in product quality. And the industry is littered with companies that went by the wayside, manufacturers who didn't live up to safety, reliability, and product defect standards. Federal Pacific comes to mind as one that kind of failed to make the investments there and kind of lost market share. Then we moved into an era where product quality was sort of table stakes, and manufacturers invested in systems to drive better controls around better controls, and more optimized supply chains. And this was largely the era of ERP and ERP investments. Where we find ourselves today, now that everybody's implemented an ERP or multiple ERPs, we've got all this economic uncertainty. We've gone through a global pandemic. And now the imperative 3 is, how do we digitize and get more intelligence around our customer and partner relationships? And how do we really move beyond just product quality and efficient delivery of products and really make the buying experience as quality as the product that we're making? And in fact, we've seen that roughly 90% of companies say that experience is with a vendor, with a manufacturer, is as important as the product itself. So the new imperative is to transform the buying experience with customers and partners. And what does that mean practically speaking, right? There's the big, kind of our big point of view, but what does that really mean on a day in and day out basis? Well, first and foremost, the buying and selling process, right? People are using the web to research your products. Oftentimes when they're requesting a quote, they've already done their research on your product and your competitor's product. So how can we make the buying process and the selling process a lot more streamlined, and how can we use that as a differentiator during a buying cycle? Similarly, we've all now invested in external channels. Maybe it's a distributor portal, a reseller portal, a customer portal, where we're sharing information about the specifications of our product or the applications and use cases in which our products are used. How do we ensure that the experience that our customers have or partners have when they're digitally engaged match up with the personal interactions that we're having with them day in and day out? And then how do we use all of this data to drive greater intimacy so we can start to predict customer behavior or partner behavior, and doing that in a way that is both scalable and flexible to change. That's kind of the world that we're seeing now, and especially in economic periods of economic uncertainty, you've got more competitors pursuing less opportunities. So more and more the buying experience needs to be a differentiator in the process. These kinds of transformations to become more data-driven, to automate the quoting and the buying experience, or adapt to a changing workforce that is accustomed to using digital systems in their personal lives. We need to drive new business models. That can be really challenging, right? ERP systems were not built to drive agility and change. They're meant to drive automation and compliance, so that we're controlling processes. And so to make this transformation in the buying experience and the selling experience, we need new platforms, we need new capabilities in our tech stack. And that's exactly what we're going to talk about today, is how we can address that using logic, using the Salesforce platform to transform the customer buying experience, to transform the partner experience for distributors and resellers. And Emma, I'd really like to turn it over to you now to talk about the types of things and the capabilities that you're seeing that logic is addressing for this important segment of our joint customer base.
Thank you, Greg. Super helpful context to have. I want to dive a little bit deeper on how ETO companies can overcome these operational challenges and really begin to thrive. So as we know, ETO products are generally extremely customizable. The question that we really want to solve is how to get the flexibility necessary in your quoting in order to configure perfect fit products without the admin burden and quoting inaccuracies. So first, we need to be able to handle wide ranges of attributes and dependencies, which can be difficult to manage without flexibility. In order to see success, you need to have flexible attributes and advanced rules engines that will guide your sales reps or your buyer to both what is and is not possible. Second, when it comes to proliferation of SKUs and pricing management, it's critical to provide your customers with multiple options, but those multiple options can cause operational headaches, which makes inventory management a lot more complex. We've seen many businesses who have configurations that are necessary but rarely used. These lead to massive volumes of SKU variations with highly variable pricing options. Businesses need to be able to create products and attributes for every option, no matter how rarely used, without placing additional stress on the admin. Third, we want to ensure compliance and feasibility or feasible configurability. With the customization that comes with ETO products, there's room for inaccurate information to be passed from the BOM or bill of materials to engineering. Businesses need to be able to pass information seamlessly between the front and back end offices to ensure proper configuration and that customer satisfaction. Lastly, at least for today, I'll touch on how we want to reduce margin leakage from underquoting or missed costs. In ETO, where products are highly customized, generating inconsistent quotes for similar products can lead to customer confusion and potentially result in lost sales that can impact your profitability. In order to prevent inaccurate quotes, you can auto-generate BOM data for engineering and sync with CAD and engineering systems without a manual process. I'll talk a little bit more about how these problems or how Logic.io solve these problems, especially in our partnership with Salesforce. Logic.io, for those of you who aren't familiar, is an add-on configurator for CPQ and commerce. that's perfectly suited for companies with complex ETO products. In large part, that's due to our attribute-based architecture, flexible headless architecture, and the logic engine that allows us to handle any level of complexity without sacrificing performance. Here, you can see at a high level how Logic.io can sit within your tech stack, specifically within Salesforce, and support streamlined data flowing from your front end to back end and back again if need be. Our internal rules engine can be syndicated for your users via your website, your CPQ users, or your partner portal. All managed in one central area, you can control which products and features show up in which channel, and you can make it look however you want. Logic.io makes it so that you can handle the flexibility that you need within Salesforce and configure any product. So Brian, you and Forefront have had a great deal of experience in this space, and I'd love to hear from you about the types of challenges you've been able to solve with this technology and even maybe show us it live.
Wonderful. Thanks, Emma. Thanks, Greg. So how does this all tie together? In our upcoming demo, while centered on packaging, it's a concatenation of several challenges we're seeing in the ETO market. Forefront has recently launched 2 separate customers on a version of this demo. As manufacturers are actually quite different. One is a packaging customer, the other is engineered to order materials for oil and gas. But their challenges are actually quite similar. They're dealing with a siloed quote process. And when we say siloed quote process, many companies are dealing with a couple different versions of that. In the past, many folks have Excel-based quoting materials because there are so many formulas, so much data that they need to have. It was impossible to put into a system before. But now with Logic.io, they can, and CPQ, they can actually pull that back in. They also either have a homegrown application, maybe it was a custom built application, or kind of an ERP-based extension. While those are all solutions, they create a siloed piece where you don't get that data flowing back and forth from your CRM. And that creates revenue leakage. When we talk about revenue leakage, one of the biggest issues you have is in a post-COVID world, we're dealing with the scenario of outdated cost information, your material cost, your operational cost, your labor costs. They changed so frequently. And if you have an Excel application, think of having to repost every time there's a change in price, and how that leakage can really wreak havoc on your sales organization. The outdated pricing information and really kind of a lack of margin control. With the ability to bring that in, you get to create actionable insights, right? So actionable insights meaning you get an approval process where you can actually put together with the power of CPQ, pull this data in and show margin approvals. And then you can also put in the ability for sales management to have better insight into quote information, not just a quote number, but actually the pieces around that quote number and why that number is. And long term, you get to understand the tracking of concessions and conclusions. In sales, we obviously make concessions. A lot of times those concessions are, hey, if you buy X amount, I'm going to put your price per item down. Well, you got to be able to track that, right? Did they actually purchase the amount that was there? And what we're going to see here is how we do that. Slow quote time, not done yet. Sorry. Going crazy here. No worries. Slow quote time, right? We deal with the turnaround time. So many companies are dealing with, long 4, 5, 6 week turnaround times because the ability to actually quote is centered around a few people. And companies, we have one company that was talking to us about losing around $2 million worth of business just because they can't turn around a quote fast enough. Not because of the quality of their product, not because of their cost, because they can't turn around a quote fast enough. And a lot of those people want to hire more folks, but because their quoting process is so complex and in a system that doesn't have a lot of ability, it's very tribal knowledge based. So the ability to kind of bring folks on and train them faster and create a process that allows them to speed up the hiring process. With Logic, they're able to kind of do that. So what can companies do about it? So the solution is a very configure and quote complex orders with Salesforce CPQ and Logic.io. So you can now, with the right tools and team, a quick, accurate, and seamless quoting experience is achievable. In the demo, we're going to talk about how Forefront helped customers with CPQ and Logic.io and utilizing Salesforce and Logic. We're able to mitigate revenue leakage. We're able to save time on with quicker quotes, increasing win rates, allowing reporting insight, right? They're very key actionable insights, and the ability to train and scale. As you can see here, one of our customers was kind enough to give us a great quote about their experience and what they're dealing with. And you can understand that they are very happy now coming off Excel and being able to work in one platform. There's no swivel chair, all the data is in one place. So enough of me talking. Let's have Christian show you with a nice technical walkthrough how this is achieved.
Yeah, so before we get started with the demo, I want to quickly summarize the use case that we'll be walking through. Also outline the basic workflow and key features at each step, so you have an idea of where we are in the process, and you can see how CPQ and Logic work together to create the preferred user experience. For our use case today, I'll be navigating from the perspective of a sales rep for a process manufacturer that produces packaging for consumer goods. I'll be working an opportunity for a client looking to purchase up to 50,000 units over a year-long agreement. My organization quotes using a cost plus price model. So the client would like to see how the price varies from 5,000, 25,000, 50,000 units. I'll start by generating a new quote for my opportunity. Here we'll focus on a simple and easy to use interface while leveraging automation in the background to ensure data quality. I'll then select a product and launch the product configurator in Logic. This will demonstrate the quick and seamless transition between CPQ and Logic platforms. In Logic, I'll then configure my product to the client spec, calculate cost in real time, and build an initial order schedule that will be synced back to my quote. Here we'll see the flexibility of the configurator while also limiting manual inputs and automating complex and standardized calculations. Back in CPQ, I'll calculate my list price at each quantity that I've selected and apply discounts to reach a final price point. I'll also show here how discounting and margins can be leveraged in an approval process and provide indicators to the user of where they currently stand with their configuration. From there, I'll select the specific quantity for my order schedule to apply to my configured product, which will push a total amount up to my quote and opportunity for reporting purposes and pipeline integrity. I'll then create a sales agreement for my finalized quote, where I'll be able to manage the distribution of the purchased quantity across that 12-month period. So let's get started. I will take screen share now. Just let me know when you can all see Salesforce.
We are all set, Christian. And a reminder, you can always drop questions throughout into the Q&A box.
Okay. So starting from my opportunity, I'll go ahead and click new quote and complete the form to generate my quote. You'll notice that I only needed to populate 3 total fields to create that record. But when I open my quote record, you can see that the related account and opportunity data has already been synced. This allows me as a sales rep to focus on configuring the product and getting the quote out to the customer without sacrificing data quality, usability, and reporting, making sure that I've populated all the required fields. From here, I can click Edit Lines to open my cart, and then I'll navigate to the product catalog to select my packaging product. So clicking select here will automatically launch Logic's product configurator from within CPQ. And I can now start building the product to my client specifications. There are some background controls that have been put in place to make sure my configuration meets certain manufacturing and engineering requirements. And I'll note those as I complete the fields in this form here. So for example, some of those controls are around the product type. Logic is dynamically pulling in available quantities You can see this table has now been populated. This is what these are the quantities available to me as a salesperson that align with our production capabilities. We also have control on material structure here. Logic is automatically filtering out operational and material options in the tables below that we'll see in just a minute, so that I know that I'm setting up my product with a valid configuration. From here, I will just enter in my client's product specifications, which will automatically generate a quick description for me, and then I'm ready to select my quantities. As a reminder, the customer requested pricing at 5,000, 25,000, 50,000 units. So I'll go ahead and select all three of those from the table, and we'll see them automatically added to my sales BOM. The quantities also carry a base margin in the column to the right. We'll be using the margin here in the cost plus price model to calculate a unique price at each available quantity. I can then move on to my product configuration. Here we see two separate tables to configure the necessary operations and raw material needed to produce this product. All product and pricing data used to drive cost calculations is centralized in Logic, meaning that the configuration is always a consistent, repeatable process regardless of who is creating the product configuration. In this example, we are simply calculating the setup and material cost to produce one unit and then scaling that to the three selected quantities. But in a production version of this configurator, the operational and material costs would be calculated dynamically to account for variation in costs by volume. So I'll go ahead and select a few options here. You can see as I add things, we see a few of the columns updating and calculating the cost. You'll notice that setup hours are being automatically populated based on the operation that I've selected. This is looking up to a table that is stored in Logic, going back to what I was referencing with the centralized database. I can also select my raw materials from here. This has a similar approach where it is pulling in unit cost from a table that's stored within Logic. So we have simple queries pulling in our raw material information that's used to calculate a total material cost. Here you'll notice that total consumed is a manual input, but this again would be driven based off of the dimensions in the selected quantities so that I get a dynamic calculation each time I enter in a new product or a new material. Okay, so now that I've fully configured my product with some very basic setup, I can go ahead and click quote, which will sync my sales BOM to my cart CPQ, which will create my order schedule for the customer requested. Okay, so I will need to pull in the configuration data from a behind the scenes configuration line item object. It's storing the cost information that was calculated within Logic. Clicking Quick Save will sync the configuration line item to the quote line so that I see my unit cost as well as the cost plus model create a list unit price for each quantity. Okay. Now that I have calculated my list price, I can go ahead and calculate my quote to populate the remaining pricing fields. So now I can see my net unit price has been calculated. I have a margin and I have a net total for each quantity. I can now apply additional discounts to reach a price point that will win me the deal. Start by adding a 5% discount on the 50,000 line, since that's the quantity that the customer is currently targeting. You can see as I enter discounts, my margin automatically recalculates. And I can see that I am evaluating each discount and the margin threshold for approval. I'll go ahead and add a few more or a couple of additional discounts here So we can see how the approval column shows different levels of approval based on my configuration. See here, as I increase the discount, I reach a higher tier of approval. And if I go beyond a certain point, which I think I'm already at the top there, hit 1. There are different levels that are displaying here. So if I were to submit this quote, I would need to go to manager approval, and these can be applied to each quantity within the order schedule. Okay. Now we'll need to assume that I've received approval and pricing, and that I've sent this quote over to the customer where they've selected the 50,000 units out of the order schedule to go ahead and place the order. I'll go ahead here and select an applied quantity, which this field looks like it's being cut off. One thing I want to note before I make this change is that my net amount on my quote is currently 0. Once I apply a specific quantity and save this, we'll see that my selected quantity will sync up to my configured product, and I'll now have a finalized quote ready to go for a sales agreement. Okay. So now that everything has synced and my packaging widget is fully configured, you can see that my quote has received an update for the net total of the quantity that I've selected. This has also been pushed up to my opportunity so that my opportunity amount is on this quote is reflected in my opportunity pipeline. From here, I'm now ready to generate my sales agreement, so I can go ahead and save this quote. I can then click Create New Sales Agreement to open a form to generate new sales agreement. And as a reminder, the customer was looking for a year-long agreement where they would also like to see the distribution spread on a monthly frequency. Okay. From the sales agreement, I can now view and modify the planned quantity over the course of that 12-month period. So I can go ahead and expand this table here. And you can see that Salesforce has automatically taken the applied quantity from the quote that was originally pulled down from the logic configuration and distributed it evenly across the sales agreement's contract term. From this view here, I can modify my quantities to increase, decrease, or ramp the quantities over this period of time. And I'm ready to move forward with order fulfillment at this point. So that concludes the demo portion.